Well, the results are in, and it's another reminder that this experiment they call socialism doesn't work. The latest victim, Venezuela. Socialistic policies there have now led to massive corruption, abject poverty, and the nation on the brink of possible civil war. So is Venezuela, which, by the way, is hugely rich in natural resources, also now facing a total collapse. Joining me now to discuss, Morgan Ortagus and Richard Grenell. Rick, let me start with you. I've been looking for civil unrest to the point of even war there for a long time. They've been able to hold it off in part because oil was over $100 a barrel. This looks like this is the breaking point for them now.
Yeah, look, I think they're on the verge of collapse. It's a serious issue. The Obama administration a couple of months ago made some acquiescence to the Venezuelans to try to get them to understand that we wanted to help. And of course, President Maduro again made the Americans the issue. He's blaming all of these problems on the Americans. He's not looking at the fiscal and monetary policy of Hugo Chavez for a number of years, who was the president there, and now he is continuing those policies of printing money and really collapsing the currency, because inflation, the IMF is saying inflation is next year going to be like 2,000% or something like that. Right. It's really out of control, and they don't have a handle on it, and they really don't have a plan. This is socialism gone wrong. You know, speaking of a plan, this is what they've done from January 2013 to January of this year. The minimum wage has gone up 465%, Morgan. And it's just, they're grasping at straws.
Yeah, and not only do they have the problems that Richard just talked about, they're also having a debt crisis. They've got about $5 billion in payments that are going to be due in October and December of this year. Their foreign reserves are at a 12-year low, I believe. So basically, what you had is, years of high oil prices, because Venezuela clearly it's a market that is controlled by one commodity. And Hugo Chavez spent like a first-round draft pick making it rain at the club for years, and that time's over now. Maduro has continued those policies. And it's not working. And the country, both Venezuela, and then when you look across the street at Brazil, they're both facing left-leaning socialist policies that just aren't working.
At least Brazil, though, impeached, their president, right, and who did not follow in Lula's footsteps in the sense of having an ideology but running the country in a different way. But I want to go back on Venezuela, Rick, and say there was a military coup in 2002 that actually saw Chavez ousted for about 48 hours. It's hard to see how this can survive without mass violence. There's certainly a divide there in this country, and everyone's making the most obvious point here. There's no economic way to fix this. China has done a little deal with them on oil, but it's more or less they're just bargaining with them. No one's coming to their aid, and I don't think anybody will. So how does this end?
Well, look, the fact is that although they have the largest oil reserves, only 25% of the economy, I mean, it's a large percent, but it's still just a quarter, is built around oil. There's a whole bunch of other industries that need to flourish. And that's not happening because the government here, again, this is the socialist policies, are putting price controls, price manipulation. We don't have equilibrium pricing going on, and so the manipulation from government has gotten the people so used to lower prices and then the government printing money. This is a long-term solution. It's a very long answer to your question, Charles, to say the only way that this is going to get fixed is not through China's help or the United States doing a bailout. It's really the policies of Venezuela, the monetary policies and fiscal policies must change. And that is going to be a hard pill for the people to swallow.
Yeah, it's hard to even see, though, how that happens without some blood being spilled. But we'll see. In the meantime, guys, I want to switch topics here for a moment, because today the families of victims of September 11th attacks, they're getting even closer now to getting some justice. The Senate approved the legislation allowing the family members to sue the government of Saudi Arabia for its role in the deadliest terror attack on American soil. The measure now goes to the House, but President Obama has actually threatened to veto the bill, Morgan.
It's interesting that this passed unanimously in the Senate today.
How rare is that?
Pretty rare. We finally have something bipartisan in Washington. One of the reasons that it was bipartisan is because there's been a lot of changes to the bill in the past few weeks. Some of the people who were not originally for this bill were concerned about retribution to the United States. Could other countries, people of other countries, turn around, do the same thing to the U.S.? So what you saw in the revisions in the work of this bill is that the country has to be involved in terrorist activity. So it's not like if there's, a very unfortunate bombing, like in Afghanistan, for example, where we accidentally, bomb a hospital, something like that. Under this bill, it's not like you would be able to sue the United States for that. So I think it's an important distinction between acts of war and terrorist acts, and I think that's why you saw the unanimous consent of the Senate today.
Rick, yesterday it was revealed for the first time how much of our debt Saudi Arabia owes, because they have been sort of threatening, if you will, to sell $750 million worth. Well, they've got less than $200 million of it, $200 billion rather, which is something of a drop in a bucket as far as those things go. But what would President Obama's opposition be to this?
Look, I'm in opposition to it as well. I agree with President Obama, newsflash, on this one issue. I think, look, we could go a million different ways in talking about this issue. The Saudis are a great ally to us, and I know that a lot of people are going to push back and say, that's not true. But when you work in a multilateral setting like I have for 8 years, and you look around the room and you're trying to find some sort of coalition building, the Saudis have always been there with us. So we've always known that Saudi charities, Saudi individuals have been very problematic in funding terrorism. We have to do more to crack down on the Saudi government so that the Saudi government then goes and stops the individuals and the charities. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a very good idea to allow individuals to sue a foreign government like the Saudis, because they're an ally. Like it or not, they were the ones that were supposed to be blunting the Iranians in the Middle East for us, and they had. But in this administration, for the past 7 years, our relationship with the Saudis is dismal. I mean, they are hitting back on us pretty hard.
Well, yeah, Rick, I got to tell you, you are in a very lonely position on that particular opinion. Morgan, last word to you, pretty quick.
Well, I'm actually going to back Rick up here on this. Having lived in Saudi Arabia for almost 2 years and working very closely with their government, they're a very important key ally in the war on terror, and it's an important. We have to have friends in this region. We can't go after ISIS and Al Qaeda alone. I
got a feeling, though, that they might need us more than we need them. But be that as it may, we all disagree. I'm happy for the families. I hope it gets through. I know you guys have foreign relationship expertise, but it just feels to the average American that these guys have not been our friends, or they've abused the friendship. Thanks a lot.
Well, I would say let Americans go after the foreign the charities and the individuals, not the government.
Okay.